American Giant makes great clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, and more right here in the U.S. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order with code STAPLE20. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, code STAPLE20.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello, and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made?
This is the podcast all about the movies you've never seen, the scripts that were never filmed, and the ideas that never even made it to the page. My name is Daniel Kaka.
And I'm Lexcee Riley. It's my turn.
Oh, fun.
We're going to jump in. It's not nerve-wracking at all. This is great. This is great.
You're going to be fine.
So we started doing this because of the spooky season. Mm-hmm. The Universal Classic Monsters are a spooky season staple. So we have Frankenstein with the squared off head and the neck bolts that is just as iconic as horror itself. There's the Bride with 3 minutes of screen time, and she's got a visual legacy as infamous as the others. So Dan, right out the gate, I'm going to quiz you.
Okay.
I gave you 2 out of technically 8 classic monsters. Mm-hmm. Can you name the official 8?
So there's the Gill Man.
Yes. The creature from the Black Lagoon is his technical name.
Technical name. We have Dracula.
Yep.
The Wolfman.
Yep.
The Invisible Man.
Yep.
Opera singer.
Yep.
And the Mummy.
Didn't you just name the Mummy twice?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, because I named our lady. Our one lady, our Scarlett Johansson of the Avengers, is the Bride of Frankenstein.
Ah.
So those are our 8. Dracula was the first, followed by Frankenstein, then the Mummy, the Invisible Man, then our Bride, the Wolfman, the Phantom of the Opera, and the creature from the Black Lagoon was the last.
Which one is owned by Universal?
They're all owned by Universal.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah. These versions, they're all based on prior books or novels, or we'll get into all that. The creature is technically their new creation. A lot of their stories are based off of other books. Mm-hmm. There are a couple original characters that are really great.
Yeah.
So
with a lot of these early studios, I know that they were trying to look for stories that were in the public domain.
Right.
And Disney went the route of
fairy tales, the Grimms.
And the Hans and all that.
The Grimms and the Hans.
Yes. For Universal, Carl Laemmle was like, well, have you heard about this Dracula character?
We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah. But before we get there, enjoy this ad.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed all of those ads. Maybe 1 ad, 2 ads,
6 ads.
In fact, we'll add some more ads to those ads.
This is just one long ad.
This ad is for Chair. Buy Chair today.
IKEA.
Art Van.
So the classic era of monsters ran from 1931 to 1956. But before we dive into our complete monster roster and the universe they could have been a part of, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. We wouldn't be having this conversation if it weren't for
Adams.
Carl Laemmle. If you live in Southern California and you're thinking of certain theaters, yes, we're talking about the same family. They're opened, owned, and run by his cousins. The movie business seems to be a family business for Uncle Carl.
Small business.
Small business. When Carl was 39 years old and living in Chicago, which means, Dan, we've still got lots of time, he pivoted careers from a bookkeeper to an owner of his very own motion picture company. And life only going to go up from there. From Chicago, he would then move to New York City and form the Independent Moving Picture Company, or IMP. 6 years later, now 45, Carl would join forces with Pat Powers of the Powers Motion Picture Company, Mark Dintonfast of the Champion Film Company, William Swanson of Rex Motion Picture Company, David Horsley of Nestor Film Company, as well as Charles Bowman and Adam Kessel of the New York Motion Picture Company. These men merged their companies to form
Captain Planet.
Yes. When all their rings were combined, they formed the Universal Film Manufacturing Company.
Oh, is this
sound familiar?
Yeah.
Warmer weather, cheaper labor, and ongoing legal battles with Thomas Edison inspired a move to the West Coast.
Thomas Edison, the more I look into him, I realize is such an asshat.
Yeah.
He
wanted the moving pictures to himself.
He was a patent troll in a way.
Oh, 100%.
And he would take things that other people have made and just like kind of took it as his own. Like the invention of the light bulb. Yep. I remember he gathered together a bunch of scientists who were trying to do essentially the same thing. And once they came together, made the light bulb, he's like, that's mine now.
Just gonna take this over here.
So it wouldn't be surprising that when he discovered or found the motion picture technology, he was like,
the motion pictures.
That's mine now.
Just going to add this to the pile of inventions.
Yes.
So Carl, now in the San Fernando Valley, serving as president of the company, would go on to open a 230-acre, the world's largest, motion picture production facility.
Is it the entertainment capital of Los Angeles?
That's right. It is. On March 15th, 1915, Universal Studios Hollywood would open. By this point, Carl had already actually done one monster movie. He had produced Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 1913 under IMP. So we are predating the classic monsters a little bit because we are still in the silent era.
Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yes.
I'm surprised was not part of the original monsters.
'Tis technically the first.
Is the first one.
Yeah. The distinction that I've come to realize is that they don't consider the silent films part of the monsters.
Okay, so the train coming to the station is not a monster.
No,
okay.
It's the talkies, but we'll get there. Because it's 1913, he's still working for IMP. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is based on the 1886 Gothic novella, Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Dr. Jekyll sends a note to his fiancée saying that he cannot accompany her to the opera because he has to tend to his patients. His colleagues, on the other hand, tell him that his research is too dangerous, but he's going to proceed anyway. After reassuring his fiancée, yet again, his experiment begins. He drinks a vial intending to release the evil. The opposite happens. He hunches and contorts, and Mr. Hyde appears. He goes into the night, terrorizing a nearby tavern, continuing his evil doing until one day he hurts a young man, just an injured man with a crutch.
I've also taken a shot of tequila.
The townspeople catch him in the act, and Hyde offers to pay for the boy's injuries. He goes back, takes the potion, and turns back into Dr. Jekyll. However, the transformation becomes uncontrollable. They call for an antidote, but it's too late. He's gone. This film is 27 minutes long, which is actually long for its time, but that's why that story feels very rushed.
Oh, that's back when you had like Nickelodeons.
Right. It's written and directed by Herbert Brennan and starring King Baggett.
King Baggett?
Baggot.
I like that bakery.
Yeah. He's one of the biggest silent movie actors of the time. So, hence why Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. In order to achieve the personality shift, they used a dissolve effect. George Blasdell of Moving Picture World commented about Jekyll and Hyde. It's through the means of dissolving process that the transformation is made peculiarly effective. You see the change of the man of good to the man of evil right before your eyes. This theme is going to get touched on in every Universal monster movie. It's the eternal fight of man's self of good versus evil. Very simple at its core. As we go through the horror team, you can see the question being asked over and over again. So are these monsters, or are they just tragic heroes, merely different than us?
That was a theme that I came across when I was doing the research for Creature from the Black Lagoon, where it's mostly just like a misunderstood person. And there was always that question that came up, is he attacking these people for the sake of attacking people, or is he simply just defending his land?
Yeah. Carl would go on to make 2 more silent monster films. Do you know what they are?
Is one of them Nosferatu?
No.
Oh.
Nosferatu, not Universal.
It's not Universal.
Also, they technically didn't acquire the rights correctly, didn't pay for them. And so at one point, Nosferatu was going to get burned.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
The first one, also a Disney movie.
I'm going to guess Sleeping Beauty.
No, it is The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Well, there's not a lot of ladies in the monster lineup. The Hunchback of Notre Dame was in 1923 and was Universal's most successful silent film. But more importantly, we meet Lon Chaney.
Oh.
Chaney was a really big character actor of the time, but he is an integral part of our movie history. In 1925, we have The Phantom of the Opera. Again, this stars Lon Chaney as the Phantom. Carl Laemmle actually read Gaston Leroux's 1910 novel of the same name in one night, bought the film rights, all for Lon Chaney to star in. Carl's niece Rebecca, professionally known as Carla Laemmle, also appeared in the film. Chaney was a master of makeup, garnering the nickname the Man of 1,000 Faces. His phantom reveal would go down in horror history as one of the most horrific moments, with several reports of screaming and fainting coming from the theaters.
I'm kind of skeptical of whenever I hear these stories of people in theaters just freaking the fuck out. I remember in film school, I was told about like the train coming to the station and people like running out of the theater because they feared that a train was coming at them. I'm like, how much of that is true, or how much is it embellished? Like when World of Worlds was on the radio, when in fact, like not that many people actually freaked out. Some people were calling the police, but like the newspapers really embellished how big the reaction is and how many people actually believed it was real.
It's very, very true. And I also was skeptical, so I looked it up. It's terrifying. So there's Christine creeping. It creates an element of horror itself.
I have that bust on my bookshelf. He stares at me whenever I watch television.
How does he not make you scream and faint?
Well, after I fainted the first dozen times, I had to turn him around.
He no longer faces us. Yeah. But he did all of that makeup by hand himself.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, accentuating his own features to look more skeletal. In real life, Chaney was a very private man. So much so in his will, he stated that his grave go unmarked, stating, "Between pictures, there is no Lon Chaney." In 1929, a shift began to happen in the moving pictures. Silent films were on their way out, and the talkies were on their way in.
I heard the story when I worked at Warner Brothers. They used to have part of The Jazz Singer as part of like the intro video that they had there. And there's that part where he says, "You ain't seen nothing yet."
Yeah.
Yeah. And it ends with that. And then it cuts to black. And there was like this really old lady in the theater. And she goes, "Al Jolson."
So as the talkies were on their way in, Uncle Carl, Father Carl Laemmle, hired his son, Carl Laemmle Jr., for creative. And Jr., as we're going to refer to him, and as many did for clarity's sake, saw potential in Dracula. And Universal legally acquired the rights for $40,000. Legally.
Now, he was the one that really pushed for horror.
Yes.
From my understanding, from the history that I like vaguely remember, is that they just wanted to be just another studio just making movies, and he was the only one that was really pushing for horror films. He
was pushing for horror films also because most studios were sort of like at this point getting their claim to fame of like what they were good at. And because it was this shift into talkies, Universal hadn't quite gotten its claim to fame yet. And he was like, vampire.
Yeah.
Horror. It was an untouched market at this time. Yeah. So that is how our monsters begin. So we're going to leave the Laemmles behind and go straight into monster territory.
Welcome back from our ad break. Brought to you by coffee. Coffee. Where is mine? I lost it.
It's right there. Do you need it?
It's okay. I'll survive.
Good luck. We left off with Universal acquiring the rights to Dracula for $40,000. Our classic monster era begins with our favorite fang-toothed man, Dracula, in 1931.
I am Dracula.
Which is based on a 1927 play, based on 1897 Bram Stoker's Dracula, making this the first sound adaptation of the novel.
Interesting. I don't know if you have this fun fact in there, but I did learn that with Bram Stoker's Dracula, the novel, Dracula actually has an aversion to the garlic flower, the tulip, that grows from the garlic seed. And it's not actually the garlic bulb itself.
So garlic we eat. Yes, yes, yes. Flower you smell. No, no, no.
Yeah. So if you have garlic around your neck,
It ain't doing anything.
no, that's not going to do anything. It's the flower in particular.
I like that lore a
That's
lot
the
better.
aversion. Yeah.
Well, casting to find Dracula wasn't nearly as smooth. Originally, they wanted Conrad Veidt, a German actor who you might know better as Major Strasser in Casablanca. However, they feared his English wasn't good enough for the talkies.
I mean, that is kind of a odd moment of switching over from silent film to the
Right.
talkies, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, you have a real weird voice.
It's very Singing in the Rain. Like, we've got a W. And Junior wasn't a fan of the Broadway Dracula that was Bela Lugosi. So the search expanded. John Ray, who had just come off of All Quiet on the Western Front, was considered. And they also considered our favorite Phantom, Lon Chaney. But he tragically died in 1930. He was diagnosed with lung cancer, which was exacerbated by fake snow lodged in his throat. Do you know what fake snow was made out of before we knew that it was bad?
Wasn't it asbestos?
It was asbestos. There is no account that says exactly what the snow was made out of when he was filming, but that's sort of what they were using at the time, so I wouldn't be surprised.
But it just looks so good, man. They just don't make snow like they used to.
But with Chaney gone, options were limited. And Lugosi fought very hard and took a pay cut in order to play the famous Count. Fun fact, there was a Spanish language version of Dracula shooting at the exact same time.
Soy Dracula.
In fact, Todd Browning's English version would film during the day, and the Spanish version would shoot on the exact same set at night.
Oh.
I feel like if you're shooting a Dracula movie, I would prefer the night shoots, but
I mean, if you're inside of a soundstage, time doesn't really
they're
matter.
not always inside of a soundstage.
Oh.
Because if you've ever taken the Universal Studios tour, I think they call it Little Europe. This is not anywhere in my notes. They're outside sometimes. Maybe on those days they flip-flopped it. The story of Dracula goes that Renfield was traveling to Dracula's castle and warned not to go because of the vampires. Renfield goes anyway, with a driver who is actually just disguised Dracula.
That's most horror films and how they begin, like in the 30s,
Yeah.
40s, 50s, even into the 70s. It's just like regular dude goes to town. Everyone in the town is like, "What are you doing
Don't do
here?
that."
Please go away." And he's like, "I'm gonna do it anyways," and be like, "Well, you kind of
Okay.
deserve to die." So
Yeah, we're doing a little synopsis of each of these monsters because
Okay.
it is super important to see the common theme
Yeah.
and where it veers later. So Renfield goes anyway. Just before reaching the castle, poof, driver disappears. But a bat leads the horses. Renfield gets to the castle, meets Dracula, who hypnotizes Renfield, who faints as a bat appears. Now everybody's on a ship, and now it's time for Dracula to post up at Carfax Abbey in England. This is where the blood carnage ensues. He first meets Mina, her fiancé John Harker, and her friend Lucy. Dracula feasts on Lucy first, but his sights are set on Mina. Meanwhile, an insect-eating Renfield is analyzed by none other than Professor Van Helsing. Dracula bites Mina, and when Dracula comes for a visit later, there's no reflection.
Where am I? Oh, Christ, where am I? I've become one. A vampire.
Which Van Helsing and Harker notice and deduce that he is our vampire. With Mina now Dracula's, Van Helsing and Harker prepare for a fight. Van Helsing prepares a wooden stake while Harker searches for his fiancée. Van Helsing finds Dracula, stakes him, killing him, and our girl Mina returns to normal. Let me be clear, this is the abridged synopsis because so much happens in Dracula. When Dracula was originally released, it doubled its box office.
what do you mean doubled its box office? Like it made double what the
Budget
was. Okay.
Yeah, which is at that time fairly new. The original ending was cut to more coincide with the Motion Picture Code's censorship. When these first couple movies are coming out, that's not a thing yet. But the original held an epilogue with Edward Van Sloan, who played Van Helsing, speaking straight to the audience.
Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. A word before you go. We hope the memories of Dracula and Renfield won't give you bad dreams. So just a word of reassurance. When you get home tonight, and the lights have been turned out, and you are afraid to look behind the curtains, and you dread to see a face appear at the window, why, just pull yourself together, and remember that after all, there are such things as vampire.
Ooh, I like it.
With that word of warning, we go on to our next monster, a mere 10 months later. Frankenstein, based off Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus.
We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image, without reckoning upon God.
The classic story we all know and love. Dr. Frankenstein sources cadaver parts from the local cemetery, sews them together, kaboom, lightning.
He's alive!
And then through a series of basically accidents, our monster kills. And the town mob ensues, chasing our poor fella to the windmill and lighting it on fire.
Here with a commentary, Frankenstein. Fire! Bang!
And we are believed that he is left for dead. There's several infamous scenes from this film, but I want to note the scene with the little girl.
Yes.
Moments before a monster appears, she asks her father, "Daddy, will you play with me?" The dad is busy, wanders off, and our monster appears. The little girl, as children often do, don't see him as a threat. They make boats out of daisies, they smile. It's gentle and kind. Then he picks up the girl.
No, you're hurting me! No!
And he throws her into the lake. It's evident pretty quickly she can't swim. Our monster tries to help, looks for help. There's no use. So Frankenstein, like Dracula, ran into moral censorship. The scene with the little girl originally shortened to when he reaches for her. We never get to see her thrown in. And the famous scene, the "It's alive," was actually a little different. It was a few lines longer when the doctor says,
Now I know what it feels like to be God.
Ooh, yeah, I can't have that.
No. If you watch the film now, both scenes have actually been put back in. This was the first time I'd watched this in a very long time. And I get why they shortened the scene with the little girl. That moment holds up. Still very horrifying. It's through a lack of education, of understanding, that he murders a child.
In a sense, yeah.
And a few scenes later, when the father, in shock, he's like carrying his daughter's lifeless body through town. It is not a quick scene. He carries her for a long time. There's also an unsettling modern image now that comes with it of a large man attempting to talk to a young female child that has aged in an interesting way over time.
Yeah.
So I would say the movie still really holds up. Frankenstein was another hit and box office success for Universal. It was also James Whale's first monster film. He'd go on to make 2 more monster films, and his vision is a stamp on the monsters forever. Frankenstein's monster is probably like the Spider-Man of the DU. The Dark Universe is what I'm going to call it. While Frankenstein and Dracula share in popularity, I would say that vampire lore, as we were just talking about, vacillates. Sometimes they're shiny, they glitter. Sometimes garlic reflection, but flower. Frankenstein's origin story and his imagery, super well known. It was Jack Pierce who was tasked with creating the creature look, which took 4 painstaking hours to complete. The look originally had to be done by none other than Bela Lugosi. However, Lugosi wanted to play Frankenstein himself and not the monster. And this was for the best, because the role went to William Henry Pratt. Do you know who that is?
Is that Boris?
It is Boris Karloff, who is another, like Lon Chaney, formative player in the Monster Mash. Karloff would go on to play the Mummy in 1932.
Imhotep, High Priest of the Temple of the Sun at Karnak. Poor old fellow, now what could you have done to make him treat you like that?
An execution for treason, I suppose.
The story of the Mummy went through several rounds to get to Imhotep. Originally inspired by the curse of King Tut's tomb and its subsequent opening in 1922, Richard Sayre and Nina Wilcox Putnam pulled from Arthur Conan Doyle's The Ring of Thoth and Alessandro Cagliostro, an Italian occultist, to write a 9-page treatment in which a 3,000-year-old magician used nitrates to stay alive.
Jeez.
Yeah. John L. Balderstorm was hired to write the script. And John was actually a journalist in 1922 and covered the opening of King Tut's tomb. So he changed it to the name of the architect of Djoser's step pyramid, which was Imhotep. And changed this one little point of Imhotep from enacting revenge on all women who looked like his ex to reviving his old love instead. So thanks, John.
Yay.
As far as the Imhotep story goes, The Mummy is quite similar to its 1999 remake, with the exception that 10 years pass and Imhotep fits into society, changing his name to Ardeth Bey before he starts searching for Anaxinamun.
Imhotep, isn't that the monster mummy thing in the Mummy ride?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Imhotep is super monster lore at this point.
Huh.
That is the Mummy's name in the OG. It is Brendan Fraser's villain.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, if you go on the ride.
But it was named after an architect.
Named after the architect.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's super cool.
He's like, well, I can't read hieroglyphics, but I can read this guy's name.
Yep.
So
The original is actually far more horror. There's more death and murder and shocker. The mummy dies at the end than its action romance predecessor. Mm-hmm. At this point, we are seeing that pattern form. Monster does bad thing. Monster gets caught. Monster dies. But our next monster is actually more of a man. An invisible man.
Oh.
By the name of Jack Griffin in 1933.
You're crazy to know who I am, aren't you? All right, I'll show you.
We open on the Lion's Head Inn, and a stranger with bandages, sunglasses, full incognito mode. He has like a prosthetic nose, walks in, goes to his room. Some time passes. Our stranger makes a mess. He's late on rent. He's throwing people down the stairs. All things a tenant should never do. So who shows up? The police. And laughing like a crazy person, he begins to unravel his bandages and disrobe, leaving him, you guessed it, invisible. All but his shirt, he runs around the table while laughing maniacally. While the setting is absolutely eerie, this movie, like a great horror movie, has really funny moments.
So he's just Winnie the Poohing around,
yes,
laughing maniacally.
Yes. He wreaks havoc on the town, like runs out. And then we cut to a lab where we are discussing a missing Jack Griffin and monocaine. It's a drug that's made from a flower that's grown in India. It draws color from everything it touches. It destroys material it's meant to bleach. It turns a dog dead white and raving mad. Jack visits his old friend, Dr. Kemp, and he says, "You'll feel better if you can see me," and demands clothing. He forces Kemp to work with him for, just some murder. And they go back to grab his notes on invisibility. Turns out the police are onto him, and Jack, in his invisible state, attacks the officer and murders him. When he finally runs into his fiancée, Flora, he's calmer, much less manic. Unfortunately, Kemp has betrayed him, and the real murder spree begins. The Invisible Man has the highest kill count of our monsters, including a train derailment and the killing of Kemp, and several others.
Jeez.
Yeah, he actually warns Kemp that he's like, "I'm going to kill you tomorrow at 10.
Ooh.
Yeah, you figure out that he has followed him this whole time. He's interrupted by a snowstorm from more murder and seeks shelter in a barn. When the police find out, they set it on fire. Because again, fire, another monster motif. Forcing Griffin out and shooting him. Wounded and in the hospital, he talks to Flora stating, "I meddled in things that man must leave alone," and dies. This is the second monster film directed by James Whale, and he keeps a more psychological theme going in his monster movies. Keep in mind, it's 1933. Green screen is not around for another decade and is not going to be at least popular until the 1980s. So how did they get the visual effect? They used an all-black set and black velvet floors to get rid of any reflection, which is ironic considering that the rumor originally was that they used mirrors to achieve the invisibility. Completely false.
This is one of those movies where the special effects, knowing the time it was made, you can kind of tell that like the special effects were discovered first and then the movie revolved around it. Anything that is not exposed properly, so when you have like dark spots,
right,
the celluloids that are on the film just don't react,
right,
which gives you the opportunity to then go in and basically film over the same roll of film again. And it gives you that effect of that. So like with the Invisible Man, if he is dressed all in black, you're not exposing that film. And then when you expose it to like the scene of people reacting, like he seems invisible, it's a very impressive shot. There is one shot in particular where he's standing in front of the mirror. And it was a composite shot that took them 4 times to go through. And it just, knowing the process, knowing how it had to line up is just still incredibly impressive.
Yeah, they went in hand painted with a brush and dye, frame by frame, to fix any imperfections.
Oh, just the amount of thought that has to go into it in pre-production to make sure that this effect works. It blows my mind.
Especially for the time period, it's really cool. I think my favorite scene is the unraveling scene. This is when all of the police come barging in and he's like, "You can't see me." Claude Rains, who plays the Invisible Man, is actually hidden inside the jacket. And there's a small wire frame supporting each of the bandages as they unwind. So they're not using the basically black screen for that. It's a completely different invention of special effect, which I think is really cool.
That's amazing.
The special effects artist, John P. Fulton. The film's final budget, because of so many effects, was $328,000. Wales monster films tend to have higher budgets, including The Bride of Frankenstein, which is going to come in 1935, and came in at $397,000, which is $100,000 over budget in 1935. So far over budget. Since this is often listed as one of the best monster films, and also I'm a little biased, I'm going to say it's worth it. For The Bride of Frankenstein, we start off with two men praising Mary Shelley for her story of Frankenstein.
I will say that I watched this movie in preparation for this episode, and I was kind of thrown off because I knew how the first one ended. I had not seen Bride of Frankenstein. I've only seen the original Frankenstein. And I was like, wait, are they doing a meta thing where they're actually talking to Mary Shelley about her book that she wrote?
Do you know who plays Mary Shelley?
I don't know her name.
Elsa Lancaster. Do you know who else she plays?
She also plays the bride.
She does.
Yeah, because I looked it up later because it said in the credits, it's like Frankenstein's mate?
Question mark.
Yeah, and they don't say it in there, but...
Did you see what the cast list says? It says a good cast is worth repeating.
Yes, the good cast
because they were doing these at the beginning and the end of the movie.
Yeah, this is definitely a time where the credits, because we're still trying to figure it out, the credits would always come before the movie, and then the movie would just end without any credits at the end, and then that's when the trailers began to show you what the next movies that were going to be out there. But I was shocked that it was the same actress between the two.
Yeah, she does a really good job. I think if it wasn't in the credits twice, I don't know that I would have noticed.
Because her name already appears as Mary Shelley. I wonder if that might have been a legal reason to be like, you can only list her name once, and that's it, and that's why they put it there, or either that or it might have been just a gimmick.
I think it's a gimmick. I really do, because she's not in a lot because she appears so late and is so mysterious. I really do think it's a gimmick.
Yeah. I wonder if maybe the director just felt bad for the actress to be like, you're such a big moment in this, and yet you're only on screen for 3 minutes, like max. We like got to get you some time.
I think James Whale, if you look at the 3 movies that he's done, because this is his third and final monster movie, they are, like I said, much more psychological. And I think there is something to be said about Mary Shelley also being like the object of affection. I think it comes from more of a psychological story place based on the way that he's directed all of these films.
To bring it back, I just kept thinking of the Predator, the actor who plays the Predator, not Jean-Claude Van Damme, the guy after him. But
Jean-Claude.
John McTiernan felt so bad for him because he's such a great actor and no one got to see his face that he made him one of the soldiers in the beginning of the movie as well. And that was my thought with the actress who played Mary Shelley. Just like, oh, you're on screen for such a little amount of time. You're not really recognizable with like all that makeup and all that, and be like, we got to like get your pretty face somewhere else in this movie somehow. And you can't be like the town hag who's yelling at people.
I was a fan of this movie as a kid, and rewatching it, there's a reason that this holds up over time. There's got to be like a layer to the Mary Shelley bride thing. It was how all of his films were. That's where we start off, is we pull a very meta, like, thank you for your story, Mary. And then we jump back to the exact moment that Frankenstein ended. And we thought that the monster was dead, but he's not.
His hand comes out of the dirt.
He's alive! Also, Henry Frankenstein, still very much alive and still very much on a quest to create life, a different life. He now like condemns the monster that he has. His fiancée Elizabeth's not happy either way. Like, please stop with your weird experiments. Once healthy again, he goes to his mentor, Dr. Pretorius, which is one of the most interesting.
I thought Dr. Pretorius like showed up at his door and was like, I got something for you.
Yes?
Yeah. Because he was sent up to his room and he's like, I'm not well. And he's like, well,
get well, because I need you to do this. Pretorius and Henry get together to create more life, even though Henry's like, I don't want to do this. I've done it. I don't want to do this again. But Dr. Pretorius is one of the most like fun characters. He is one of their now original characters. He is written for this sequel, because the sequel is actually really just part 2 of Mary Shelley's story. And he delivers the now famous line,
to a new world of gods and monsters.
And Pretorius begins to make a mate for the monster, much to Henry's disagreement. It's okay. Our monster friend, he's already got his own friend. He found this hermit, and they smoke together, they drink together, they spend more time together than our monster actually spends with his bride.
So I have to admit something. I watched Young Frankenstein a lot growing up, and not seeing Bride of Frankenstein, I remember watching the scene where that Frankenstein goes and finds the blind man. And there's that comedic scene where he's like pouring the tea, pours it in his lap. And the perfect comedic duo is always clumsy monster and blind man.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's just a funny moment. And then I saw this scene, which is like the pivotal scene. I feel like they're kind of course correcting from like the little girl from the first movie to be like, oh, because he doesn't see that he looks like a monster, he can look past that and be like, oh, he's just a friend.
Right.
I suddenly put it all together, be like, oh, he's paying homage to it.
He learns the words friend and good.
Yeah. Wine, good.
Right. Friend, good.
Smoke, good.
Unfortunately, their time together comes to a stop when two hunters recognize the monster, attack them, and burn down the cottage. We're just lighting everything on fire again.
Yeah, we're not learning anything. Fire is still bad.
Fire's still bad. The monster makes his way back to Pretorius, which I'm always like, oh, here we go. And he learns of the making of the mate, and they just eat some dinner. There are a lot of very relaxed scenes in this movie, which is
a movie that's 88 minutes long. It's a very short movie.
Long for that time, though.
There's a lot of like slow burns. The amount of time that he spends with the blind person
is a long time.
If you shorten that to today's standards, it would be a tight 5.
Yeah. They have their dinner. Pretorius needs Henry's help, though. But, now Henry and Elizabeth, totally married. Henry refuses. Pretorius calls upon the monster to kidnap Elizabeth, assures Henry she'll be safe as long as you help us with the mate making. Oh, and of course, there's a storm brewing. Henry and Pretorius are actually excited about finishing this creation, which I don't know if you caught it. It feels like a flip to me. Henry's like super invested all of a sudden.
He's like, maybe this one will be the good one.
Right. We've got our lightning again. Boom. And we've got a bride. We see our bride at roughly an hour and 9 minutes into the film out of a 1 hour and 14-minute film.
That's what baffled me, is that she was being created. I remember watching the movie and I'd paused it and I was like, I think 45 minutes in, I was like, we haven't seen a bride at all yet. And I was like, she's got to be like around the corner or something like that. And then when they got to that scene, I was like, clearly this is the beginning of Act 2.
No.
No, I'm like,
we've got 5 minutes left.
How is it that she got struck by lightning and there's like 2 minutes left of the movie? What are you going to do?
But what's great is her movement is terrifying.
Yeah.
She is jittery and frantic and a little feral.
She's like a bird.
She is a wild animal. Also, she got struck by lightning and is just in a room full of dudes staring at her. I would also be like, what is happening?
Yeah.
She doesn't speak, but she does have this incredible scream.
Yes.
So does this make her the first true Scream Queen?
I believe so.
Yeah. So this moment happens and the monster says she hates me. The monster shows more emotion and heart in this movie than any of the actual humans. And kudos to Karloff, because he sheds several tears in that incredibly heavy makeup. The monster then ushers out Henry and Elizabeth saying, go, live, before turning to Pretorius, and then the bride. You stay. We belong dead.
That moment where he comes to the realization of like, I'm going to destroy not only myself because I'm a monster, but I'm going to destroy the actual monster.
Yeah. There is a lot of discussion around Dr. Pretorius specifically. Over time, he has been identified as homosexual, even though for 1935, they can't actually reference it. But Whale was openly gay. The Hollywood production code changed none of the doctor's behavior. And so it's interesting that over time, his mannerisms and the absence of the bride in the film and the relationship with the hermit has become a bigger story.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. But I also think it's really interesting because Whale directs it so that Henry and Elizabeth go. And the monster very specifically and sternly, like he snaps his neck to Pretorius to have him stay. There is like a deeper level to this movie than I think most people talk about. And as I get older and we actually are talking about these things in society, I love that it's been unchanged and that Pretorius is such a fan favorite character. So the monster pulls a lever, destroys the laboratory, and Dr. Pretorius and his bride are dead in the destruction.
Go! You live! Go! You stay. We belong dead.
And then we have a bit of a gap. In 1941, so 6 years later, The Wolfman hits theaters.
Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
Oh, quit handing me that. You're just wasting your time.
The wolf bit you, didn't he?
Yeah.
Starring Lon Chaney Jr. But we'll drop the Jr., an ode to his father, or probably more in like an ode to the business that we call show. This is technically Universal's second werewolf movie, with the first being 1935's Werewolf of London, but they consider the tried and true Wolfman is Chaney's Larry Talbot. Larry returns to Wales to deal with his family matters when he falls in love with Gwen. He buys a cane with a silver wolf's head to get a chance to talk to her, and she gives him the werewolf lore. A man changes at certain times of the year, and a pentagram appears in the palm of his next victim. Through much persuading, they wind up going on a date with Gwen and Gwen's friend, Third Wheel Jenny. On this date, they have their fortunes read by none other than Bela Lugosi.
Oh.
Character name? Bella.
Oh.
Bella sees a pentagram on Jenny's hand. He warns her, sends her off, and not too much later, we hear screams from Jenny. Larry goes to save her, beats the wolf with his new cane, but is bitten in the process. The next morning, his wound completely healed. Bella warns Larry that the wolf that bit him was her son, Bella.
The son's name is Bella.
The son's name is Bella.
Not the fortune teller.
The fortune teller is Bella.
Fortune teller.
There's so many Bellas. Okay. Bela Lugosi plays fortune teller, who warns the victim that that's going to happen, and then turns out werewolf, also Bella. Yeah.
Okay.
She warns him that he is now a werewolf too, that Larry is now a werewolf because Bella bit Larry, and that the only thing that can help is silver. She gives him his charm to stop his transformation, and Larry gives this charm to Gwen for protection instead. The next night, Larry has the first wolf rampage, killing a villager with no memory of this the next morning. The next night, the town sets a trap, but Bella's mother uses a spell to set him free. Now understanding the truth that he is, in fact, a werewolf, he goes to say goodbye to Gwen and sees the pentagram on her hand. Larry goes to his father for help, explaining that, hey, I'm a wolf. His father's like, no, you're not. And to prove that you're not, I'm going to just tie you up to this chair real quick.
That's what you do when you don't believe your child.
Right. You are a delusional man, and I'm going to tie you to this chair. But when the moon rises and his wolf form comes out, he attacks Gwen. His father uses the silver cane to beat the wolf. And when Bella's mom, Maleva, she uses that same spell again, and the now dead werewolf transforms into dead Larry.
That's the iconic scene where he's like laying down. It like fades. Yeah.
They really avoid showing the transition until that moment.
That transition, I imagine, would take so long. We have this character, and I'm sure I think they shot it in reverse, where they had him lay down, and then they get to the makeup chair, put a little bit on him, he lay down again in the same spot, and just like progressively until he was like full wolf.
Yeah. So Jack Pierce, who designed Frankenstein's monster and the Werewolf of London, is back to design this makeup, but they wanted to see more of the face.
Yeah.
So it took 5 to 6 hours to get Lon Chaney Jr. into full makeup. Then he'd get on set, and to do these scenes, he had to sit completely motionless for hours while they shot frame by frame. And apparently the crew would sometimes just break for lunch and leave him. I read one account where they were actually like nailing some of the parts of his fingers to keep him to stop from moving. I believe they're trying to like nail the wolf part, but like sounds like some finger got in there accidentally. So not super nice for him. The Wolfman became so popular that Chaney would go on to reprise his role 4 more times, even though Larry Talbot never actually gets his own sequel. The makeup would get easier. Lon Chaney Jr. would go on to play the Mummy, Frankenstein's monster, and Count Alucard. Count Alucard is just Dracula backwards. in other various monster films, meaning he played each of the core four at one point or another.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So then next up, we have the 1943 Phantom of the Opera. And this is the Phantom of the Opera that is based on the book, based on Lon Chaney original senior's version. This is the one that is technically in the monster lineup.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Even though a lot of art uses Lon Chaney's version, and to me that seems like it makes more sense if we're going with the rules that they are the talkies and not the silent ones. This is technically our Phantom. He's played by Claude Rains, who played the Invisible Man.
Yeah.
We're just keeping all of our contracted actors working.
I mean, this is around a time where when you signed on an actor, they weren't just freelance and could jump around to different studios. Like, you own them, and if another studio wanted to use them, you would have to put them out on loan with a contract with that different studio. So it makes sense to be like...
Right, we got to keep you employed.
There were stories I heard at Warner Brothers that, like, Jack Warner would yell at the writers to say, like, hey, we have Humphrey Bogart. We need to keep filming with him. And he would tell them to write a script over the weekend so they could start filming on Monday.
Yep. It seems like this is a time when talkies have been around for a minute. So now we're sort of shifting yet again. This studio in particular itself was suffering from a lot of financial problems. And this is the reason why movies are starting to take another minute to get out instead of having, 2-3 a year. It's also the time that Carl Laemmle and Carl Laemmle Jr. are both removed from the company.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's okay. They started a movie theater company.
Those are the cousins. But they're removed, and the original talks of the Phantom were for Boris Karloff. Now we're in 1943. We got Claude Rains, and this is the story that is more popular in today, where it's Christine Dubois. If you're a musical theater nerd like I am, she's Christine Daae, is a young soprano who the Phantom of the Paris Opera House falls in love with, or just sort of like wants to see her succeed. A little fuzzy in this one. Raoul is also in love with Christine. So is Anatole. So the film has kind of a love quadrangle going on. But Raoul hatches a plan to catch the Phantom by not letting Christine perform. Technically, it works. Phantom comes out of hiding, crashing down the chandelier, and grabbing Christine in the process. Down once more into his underground lair, Christine sneaks up and removes the mask, seeing the Phantom's disfigured face. It's not the same impact.
Not the...
Yeah, it's not as everybody scream and faint in the theater. Anatole and Raoul follow downward, and they find them, and things begin to cave in, quite literally. Our Phantom gets trapped on there. The trio escapes. They ask Christine to choose between them, but she chooses herself. Well, rather her singing career.
Good for her.
Right. That is the most feministic thing we'll have in this. The film came out to mixed reviews. It wasn't as frightening, like I said. Lon Chaney Jr., a little miffed that he didn't get asked because he was still under contract.
Oh.
Yeah. In between the main 8, we have a lot of sequels. We have Dracula's Daughter, Son of Frankenstein, and The Mummy's Hand.
Yeah.
The Invisible Man has returned. We've even gotten an Invisible Woman and an Invisible Agent. It's around this time that the crossovers start to begin. In 1943, right before Phantom, we did have Frankenstein meets the Wolfman.
He harbored a monster in his house, a thing created by black magic.
Dr. Frankenstein. Dead.
Which, by the way, in this one, Lon Chaney returns as Wolfman, but Frankenstein's monster, played by Bela Lugosi.
Oh.
Yeah.
The role he was made for.
And then in 1944, we get House of Frankenstein. Previous reports in 1943 said there was a film in production titled Chamber of Horrors, and this was announced by The Hollywood Reporter, noting that the cast would include Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Jr., Bela Lugosi, Claude Rains, and more. Chamber of Horrors never went into production.
Oh, you got the Rat Pack together and they couldn't even make a movie?
Kurt Sodemack stated, the idea was to put all the horror characters into one picture. I only wrote the story. I didn't write the script. I never saw a picture.
Man, this is really like the Avengers moment for them. And
right? Almost like there's a cinematic universe being born. The idea really took off, though, and that is when House of Frankenstein is born. Now's the time. We're going to get out some red string. We're all going to have our best Charlie Day impression because the casting continues to be wild. Okay, the monster, not played by Karloff, but Glenn Strange, even though Karloff is in this picture as Dr. Gustav Niemann. Lon Chaney Jr. is back and actually plays the Wolfman, but Bela Lugosi is gone. But Dracula still here. Now played by John Carradine. Claude Rains, nor the Invisible Man, nowhere to be found or seen. The plot is bananas and real hard to follow, so we're going to glide right by that. But I think there's two fun things to note about this script. Of all the monsters that we meet, we also get a new character, the name of Daniel.
Oh, it's a good name.
He's a hunchback, ?
Hey.
And the new doctor's assistant.
Yeah, that's Igor.
Yeah, it's Igor. He's got an Igor vibe about him.
And they just gave him a new name?
Yeah.
Just like
Daniel. He helps the doctor escape from prison in exchange for the promise of a new body. And mainly this is just more fun because your name is Daniel. The only thread that connects House of Frankenstein to its sequel, House of Dracula, is Frankenstein's monster is clutching a skeleton of Dr. Neiman, again, played by Boris Karloff. So we have Frankenstein's monster, which is originated by Boris Karloff, holding the skeleton of a new Boris Karloff character.
Oh.
It's a hat on a hat.
So meta.
More sequels would then come to fruition. We've got The She-Wolf of London. The Mummy has a ghost and a curse, but still no offspring. And finally, we bring in Abbott and Costello.
Hey!
Who screamed? You did. I did?
I know what Abbott and Costello is. You know. Do you want to tell the people who Abbott and Costello are?
I mean, they were a comedic duo. They're famous for Who's on First?
What's on Second?
They started running these specials where they would run.
They had 4 of them.
Yeah, they would run into a bunch of the Universal.
Yep, they meet Frankenstein, and then the title is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, but Dracula and the Wolfman are totally in this one. Then they meet the Invisible Man, the Mummy, Dr. Jekyll, and Mr. Hyde. So they do go through most of the crew.
Yes. The way that they present these specials, it's almost like a commercial.
Yeah.
These were shown on television to be like, ooh, these scary monsters. But I think it's a way to like soften the blow for anyone who isn't really into scary movies. If you have Abbott and Costello, who is well known to like kind of poke fun at them and be like, oh, okay, maybe I can handle a Dracula type movie.
It's at this time that it seems like horror is kind of winding down, or at least the call for the monsters. So this is a way to keep them relevant, but also comedy is at a much bigger high. So you're just keeping them in the comedy circle.
Yeah. And it's kind of keeping the franchise relevant, but it is definitely hitting one of those moments where the franchise is hitting a lull. It's similar to Godzilla. First Godzilla, second Godzilla is pretty great, but then eventually it just kind of devolves into Godzilla versus monster, this one. And it's like crab monster or space monster or something like that. And that's kind of where the monster universe at Universal just kind of went towards, is like, okay, well, we have these established monsters. What is an element on top of that that we can capitalize on? And Bride of Frankenstein is like put out there as like, this is how you properly do a sequel. But the thing is that they did not take what made Bride of Frankenstein so great and apply it to the other sequels. They were just like, oh, we just add a new character. That's all we need to do.
When you have Dracula's Daughter and The Son of Frankenstein, they're still decent sequels. But I think when you have The Bride of Frankenstein, which is also sort of said as one of the best sequels of all time, is a real hard standard to keep up.
Yeah.
When things get tough, we sort of throw things at a wall, but out of those tough things can also come really cool new things. And this is when we got our last monster, which is also the original monster, not based on anything.
Which we'll hear about after this ad break.
We are on to our final creature feature.
Ooh.
The creature from the Black Lagoon.
Could it possibly belong to a Pleistocene man?
Well, the chances are much greater that hand belonged to an amphibian, Mark. One that spent a great deal of time in the water.
Well, then how do you account for the structure of the fingers? Obviously for land use.
One that I think you know well.
Yes, it's one of my favorite musicals.
I'm not going to go too deep into this one because you did do such a nice job in the John Carpenter Creature from the Black Lagoon episode.
Yeah, so if you want to hear about that, stop this podcast now. Listen to that entire podcast and then come right back. We'll
exactly.
Wait.
Yeah. We're just going to have silence run while you do that. The big abridged version and the scientific team goes to the Amazon to study fossils. The creature spots the team. There's this slight implication that the creature likes Kay, the female.
Implication? He longingly looks at her in a bikini.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
The creature follows the Rita, which is their boat, down the Amazon. The creature kills some of the team members, attempts to abduct Kay, then finally does get Kay, takes her back to his lair. We're always taking a lady back to a lair. But the remaining team rescues Kay, shooting the creature, and his body sinks to the depths.
Or does it?
Or bum, bum, bum. Correct, because the creature will come back. This is another one we've seen recently in The Shape of Water, which is Guillermo del Toro's first foray into the monster world.
What's crazy about Creature from the Black Lagoon, and this is something that I mentioned in the John Carpenter episode as well, is that he comes so late in the game.
Yeah.
And
as
for
does
him,
the bride.
Mm-hmm. And that was something that baffled me about the Gilman, was that for all of my life, he's just one of the monster cast members.
Mm-hmm.
He's like one of the essentials. Always has been. And I figured that, you know, it was just like the other ones, Dracula, Frankenstein, established right away and just kind of like fades into sequels and whatnot. So that's what I assumed, not knowing that the monster universe has been going on. It's been fading out. Abbott and Costello have entered the picture. Now they introduce the Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it's a huge hit and is now one of the essentials. Just baffling.
And then they don't really go on to do much more after that.
It feels like if in the MCU, because we're definitely in that phase where it's
right.
kind of like,
So that's where we're at now. We've met all of our Avengers.
Yeah. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, Deadpool is amazing.
Oh, he is the Deadpool. There are some like elements of modern secrecy in these old stories. Like there are reports that Boris Karloff had to wear a bag over his head when they were shooting so that no audience member would see his face until the monster's actual reveal. Like apparently, like, do you need to go to the bathroom? We're just going to go in there. Do your thing. Like you can do the bag off in there, but like people were leading him around with a bag on his head.
It's like Danny DeVito as the Penguin. Like they would have to really hide him on the lot so that no one would see him.
Yeah, that's how The Invisible Man was filmed in like intense secrecy because of the advanced nature of the special effects. So these are things that we think about now that we have social media. You're constantly like, oh, look at these pictures from set. This wasn't a thing back then. So these monsters are sort of a little bit ahead of their time. And when you talk about a cinematic universe, I mean, come on, Abbott and Costello. To me, as we're jumping into discussing the dark universe, which came first, like chicken or the egg? Did the monsters have a cinematic universe first? Because it kind of feels like they did.
Yeah. I feel like this is more of a product of efficiency.
Yes.
And marketing rather than a well thought out, how do we connect everything together? This will unfortunately conclude part 1 of our episode about Universal Studios and the history of the classic monsters. Join us for part 2 when we go over the launch of the Dark Universe, what went wrong, and the future of classic monsters. While you anticipate part 2, you can connect with us on our socials. We are on Instagram and TikTok at How Did This Not Get Made, and the platform formerly known as Twitter at HDTNGM. We also have a YouTube channel under the same name as the show. If you follow us, you'll see artwork and content related to the subjects of our episodes, and you'll see behind the scenes video of us recording the show. Until next time, bye-bye.
He did the Monster Mash. It was a graveyard smash.